Well, hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel, Emma Desi. I am a thriller writer and I'm a book coach, and I specialize in helping first-time writers write their first novel. So it's a real thrill for me to be a part of somebody's journey, a very exciting part of somebody's journey. Now, if you're new to me, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I must do my YouTube thing. Hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell so you get notified when I have my next interviews coming out, because there's always a new one which is going to help you on your road to writing your first or writing your next novel. But today I'm delighted to have Megan Haskell and Greta Boris with me today. Megan Haskell is the award-winning fantasy adventure novelist, and Greta Boris is the US Today best-selling mystery and thriller author. And they joined forces 6 years ago to teach others what they've learned on their journey to publication and beyond. And in 2020, they founded the Author Wheel, a business focused on helping writers through books, a blog, and in-person and online courses. And in 2022, they added the podcast, the Author Wheel podcast. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having us. This is wonderful.
Yeah, hi. We're going to have to not talk over each other because there's three of us. We do this on the podcast. Hi, Emma. So fun to be here.
Now, we first met, I don't know if you remember, but we first met a little while ago. We were doing a joint promotion together with InfoStack, and you very kindly reached out, and I was so glad that you did, because it was fun getting to know you and sort of chatting with you about it. And I always love connecting with new writers and people who are sort of trying to do what I'm doing, which is help writers get their books written and out into the world. So I was really glad that you reached out, and I'm so pleased to be able to talk to you today.
Well, absolutely. It's kind of interesting because that experience when we did that InfoStack and reached out to you and a few other people was to some extent what inspired us to do the podcast. Or rather, I should say that Greta was finally able to drag me into doing the podcast. Because I'm always dragging my feet on this stuff, but it was so wonderful to get to chat with you and meet all these new we call them author service providers, but book coaches, editors, people who have products and things that really help, that are reliable, that are legitimate, that we believe in, that help writers move forward and learn what they need to know to achieve their goals. So Yay. It was great. It was great to talk with you. Great to be back.
Yay. So I think that's one of the really nice things about the author world as opposed to some other industries. But I think generally on the whole, authors are a really supportive bunch, and we all kind of want each other to do well. And I see it, the 20 books to 50K, if you lift the tide, you lift everybody, you lift the whole boat up. And so when one person does well, everybody does well. And it's really nice. But Megan, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your journey to writing and to publication.
Sure. So I was never a creative writer as a kid, but I was a voracious reader. So I actually started creative writing when I had a job. I was working as a forensic accountant, actually. So it was a heavy number crunching job, and I needed a creative outlet, and I had an hour-long commute by train. So I started writing, and I originally told little stories about the people on the train, and then I decided I wanted to try my hand at writing a novel. So that all started in like 2006 or 2007, somewhere in there. And then, I continued writing while working and all of that. And then I had my first daughter in 2012, and I decided to leave my job and be a stay-at-home mom to take care of her while she was a baby and toddler. And that was when I had my idea for the first book in the Senyari Chronicles. So I spent a couple years writing that first book, and doing it during nap times and after she went to bed, and all of that, finding the time. And then in 2015, I had my second daughter, but about 3 weeks before I had her, I published that book. Yay. So that's kind of my origin story. And then, it kind of, got bitten by the bug, realized I really wanted to run my own business and I really wanted to keep doing this. And it was a great way to work around my children's schedules instead of having my children's schedules work around me.
Mhm.
And so I stuck with it.
Mhm.
And then Greta and I met, actually, I was pregnant with my second daughter. All my time is like based on my children's lives. That's my time scale. So Greta and I met in 2014 because I was pregnant with Julia at a writers conference and became friends. And then a few years later, we were in a writing group together. And then we kind of joined forces and ultimately decided we wanted to attend the conference, but didn't want to pay for it. So we pitched a course and they accepted us. So we taught a course, and that was how we kind of came together to teach and share our writing journey with other authors.
Mm-hmm. Two things that you've said there I want to kind of just highlight for our listeners who might be at those early stages. I love that you started writing on the train. I don't know if you know the author Mark Dawson.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know him, but I know of him. Yes.
He was the same. He had the hour-long commute on the train and started writing his books there. So if anyone's listening and saying, I can't do it because I commute to work and I, don't have the time, I want you to hear that's at least two people you know of now who do it on that started off on their commute. And I don't know if you know Michael Leron. Again, he's another person who writes on the move. He writes on his phone. He writes some of his novels on his phone. I don't know how he does that, but it's perfectly doable. And then also being a stay-at-home mum, that's when I started writing for real as well, like making up my mind to do this. Being a stay-at-home parent or becoming a parent, there's something about it, I think, for a lot of women that it becomes this kind of catalyst for change and not necessarily wanting to go back to the old way, but wanting to do something different. Did you find that was a catalyst for you? Or did you ever think of going back to your
Yeah, so I had always wanted to take a few years off. I mean, that was kind of, my husband and I planned it out so that when we had our daughter, he could be our primary income and I could stay at home. And the plan was, until they went back to school, right? All our kids went back to kindergarten and were full-time at school. That was the original plan. But yes, I think once I realized the validity in particularly self-publishing and in building my own business and in being able to set my own schedule and still make an income, still have a life that was me and not my kids, which was very important to me. I'm an Enneagram achiever personality type, if you do any of that stuff. So I'm not one who can just sit. I can't, I have to be out doing things. I have to be out setting goals and achieving them. That's just part of my personality. And so for me, I needed that extra, but being able to do it at home was kind of eye-opening. It was definitely a transition instead of going back and, achieving in the quote unquote normal or corporate sense of the word.
Yeah, it opened up a whole new world to me as well, just how entrepreneurial people live, and it's not based on a 9-to-5 or somebody else kind of telling you when you turn up. So I just thought those were two really, really good things to highlight for our listeners who are maybe at that beginning and feeling that they can't do it. But here we are, we've got lots of other writers who started in the same way, so you can do it. Greta, well, lovely to see you two. Please tell us about your journey to writing.
So unlike Megan, I was a booky, writey kind of kid, and grew up in a household with a dad who was an editor, magazines primarily. So my first degree that I went after was English. I ended up switching degrees because I was a kid. But anyway, that was my first choice originally. And my first jobs out of college were at magazines, working in magazines. So when I went back after my raising my kids to work, I was teaching fitness and personal training. And all my clients kept saying, you should write a book, because I kept telling them things and throwing papers at them. And that was the very, very beginning. Like I just heard of Kindle and that people could indie publish. And I thought, we didn't even call it indie publishing. Back then we called it self-publishing, right? And I thought, oh, well, I'll do that. So I wrote a book called The Wine and Chocolate Workout. And I did self-publish. I had no idea what I was doing. My dad edited it for me, so I didn't know I needed an editor. And that book actually did hit the Kindle bestseller list and all that kind of thing. It was up there with the wheat belly diet for like a week. But that kind of got me bit by the writing bug and back into writing. But I immediately went into magazine writing, and I wrote for several different magazines, and then I interviewed.
Which magazine, Greta?
Oh, she always wants me to tell you, a lot of different magazines, but the one that I'm the most famous for is I was the Walking Dead girl for Zombies magazine. Yes. And I do think, because I love The Walking Dead, I know it's just so weird, but I do love The Walking Dead. Kind of off it these days. It got kind of soap opera-y, but in the best. Anyway, so it was kind of writing about movies and TV and that kind of thing. I did a lot of that. And then I interviewed 2 fiction authors that made me go, oh, maybe I could write fiction. And it's not just for these all-time special people. I think I kind of had it in my head that unless you had to have some special gene, to be like J.K. Rowling or somebody famous, or you couldn't really write fiction. I thought, well, I should give it a whirl. So I did. And the first book I wrote was terrible. I kept trying, pitching, getting rejected. Every time a publisher, an agent would say, well, this is what's wrong with your book, I'd rewrite again. And eventually I did get picked up by a boutique press for a psychological suspense series, The 7 Deadly Sins, which is going to be re-released this in May. I rewrote the first book because, first books, it wasn't very good. And they're kind of relaunching the whole series. So that series is traditionally published. And that's kind of what got Megan and I teaching, was that she never wanted traditional publishing. She was going indie. She wanted to do her own business. And for me, it was like, well, I'd been with magazines. My dad was an editor. I just kind of thought you kind of had to do that. So I went that way with that series. So our first courses that we taught together, and we also have a book about this, were about, just there's no right way, which is our tagline for our podcast. And thank you. Here's our book, Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career. Because there's no single right way to produce, publish, or promote your work, just what's right for you and your particular project and your personality and all those things. So, and now we've obviously had a lot of impact on each other, because in 2022, I launched my own little imprint, Cryptic Press, and started publishing a new, more cozy paranormal mystery series, which I'm having a blast with. But I really appreciated what we were talking about right before we got on, that, when you do work with a publisher, and then when you do it yourself, you begin to realize, well, this is a legit business. When you do it, there's a lot of little hats to put on and a lot of little pieces of this puzzle. But I'm also an Enneagram achiever, and it keeps me out of trouble. So
yeah. Well, that's so interesting. We all are then. That's number 4, isn't it? I think it's number 3 or 4. Three.
Yeah.
I just recently did mine, and that was 3, 6, and 9. That's right. It was I love these personality things. They answer so many questions for me and make me kind of go, oh, it is normal. Other people do this too. That's okay. So, Greta, I wanted to ask you about this. We'll pick up a couple of things here. I love that you said you kept working at it until you got the publishing deal you were looking for. I think that is another message for everybody to hear as well. You keep trying, you keep refining. If that's what you want, you keep going for it and you will get there. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the fact that you had come from the sort of print journal world, from magazines, because this is something that surprised me. I had always thought, you know, if you have started off in journalism, making the switch to fiction will be really easy because you've been writing, you've been getting paid for your writing for all this time. You've got a level of confidence that comes with using words, telling stories in a shorter form, but still telling stories, that it would be a lot easier then, confidence wise, to make that switch from non-fiction to fiction. But I've spoken to a lot of journalists, not a lot, a number of journalists who have been nervous about making that transition from non-fiction to fiction. And that really surprised me. What do you think was that kind of change? Why do you think, and even though you've got all that experience with writing and working with publishers and editors, why do you think that so many journalists still do find that quite tricky to make that transition?
Because fiction writing is like a completely different discipline, and you don't quite realize that, because you think because you can turn a phrase and because you have a decent vocabulary and command of language and how to write, that you could, but it's completely different. I mean, you know, maybe there's some advantages in the very beginning, but honestly, the hardest thing for me was thinking big and thinking story structure. I kept getting lost in the weeds because, you know, when you're writing a 1,200 word article, you can pay attention to every single word and every single sentence, and you can edit yourself. But when you're trying to write a book, if you do that with every 1,200 words and you're trying to hit 80,000 words, like, that book ain't never going to get written. And so it was that micromanaging myself. I had to stop it and give myself permission to write the crappy first draft, and then go in and work on it.
I want to add to that too, because even though I didn't do journalism, there is a huge difference mentally between our fiction work and our nonfiction work. Yes. To me, it's two different sides of my personality. It splits that mental framework. So the fiction, because it is creative in terms of it, like, it's completely from your own imagination, right? You're coming up with the characters, you're coming up with the story, you're coming up with the content. It doesn't already pre-exist. Whereas with journalism, I think, and definitely with like our nonfiction, I find that's often easier to write because I already know the content. It's just, I have to spit it out on the page. So it's like, you know, when I'm talking about productivity, and, you know, how to gamify your writing life, that's one of our courses. I've already internalized all that. We've been working on it for years. So when I actually go to put it on the page, it's much, much faster and easier than trying to be totally creative with something brand new, all the world building, all the other stuff that comes along with fiction.
I 100% agree. And also with nonfiction, it's kind of like you just get organized and you sort of decide, how are you going to tackle this topic? What needs to come first, next, you know, so you get organized. And then if there is a piece of the puzzle that you are unclear about, that you feel like needs to be discussed, but you don't know that much about it, you can just do research and you just find out. You know, but it's like, you know, when you're writing a fiction story, like I'm in the middle of a fiction story right now, and I'm trying to decide some of the motivations of the criminals, like, why do they do what they do? Well, that's not just something you can look up, you know, it's out of my brain, you know, so I can look up ideas of how other people in the real world who committed those kinds of crimes, what were their motivations, and I can look up psychology things about what makes certain kinds of, you know, personalities that are broken makes them broken, and I can look up those kinds of things, but that's only food for thought. It's not the thing. I can't, you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not just going to write down my research. That research has to just inform my creativity. It's this whole different step, and I think fiction writing is much more difficult and emotionally draining and all of that, and more rewarding, because most things that are difficult are rewarding, right?
Yes, for sure, for sure. Oh, well, thanks for sort of talking into that. I find it fascinating and kind of getting different people's perspectives on that. But talking about things that are sort of new, challenging, difficult, and equally rewarding, the both of you have, you're doing a new venture, which you're looking into. You're doing a Kickstarter, which is very, very exciting. And that was one of the reasons I really wanted to talk to you both, because this is something I know nothing about. I've never kind of even looked into it. So I was really kind of, oh, I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll interview them, and then I'll know what to do when I need to do it.
Exactly. Yes.
So the only thing I do have, or sort of mostly know about it, is, you know, is Brandon Sanderson and his big famous Kickstarter, which, I mean, he achieved record amount, what was it, $41 million, or maybe even more by now. So that's at one end of the scale. I'm sure you were aiming for that as well.
Yes. Yes. $42 million. Here I come.
That's it. That's it. But let's go back to basics. So for those who do not know what Kickstarter or crowdfunding is, Megan, I wonder if you would just kind of explain to us what it is, basically.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Kickstarter is a platform, and there are a few different ones out there. Kickstarter is just one of them, but it seems to be very popular right now within publishing. But it's a platform where creators, so, you know, whether that's authors or artists or game designers, or there's all sorts of different things you can do, but they think up a project and they decide that they want to do it. But they're trying to figure out if there's a market for it, number one, and get funding for it, number two. So for ours, basically what we did was we created our project, and we're doing a omnibus paperback of our 3 quick guides, and then adding in a brand new Kickstarter exclusive section. So it's, you know, something new. Plus then we're creating courses around it. So that's our idea. So now we need to know if there are people who actually want that idea and are willing to pay for it and willing to support it. And it gives us the funding we need to actually bring that project to life. So for backers, you know, readers or the writers in our case who would support the project, they go on and they say, oh yeah, that looks pretty cool. And there are tiers. And so you can say, okay, well, I can't afford, you know, the full super VIP massive package, or I don't want all those things, but maybe I do want just the paperback. And so you can pick that tier. Or you want the paperback, in our case for our project, you want the paperback and one of the courses. So you can pick that tier. And they're each priced differently. And so you say, I pledge whatever that tier price is to support this project. So then when the campaign ends, it's a set period of time. And when it ends, if you've met that funding goal, then the creator is obligated to create it and actually bring it out to life, right? So backers are kind of like, I like to think of them as like mini venture capitalists. You're voting with your money for what you want and what you want to see, you know, come alive. And then in return, of course, you actually get the thing. So it's like a pre-order as well. So it's a really neat system where creators can earn some money for the projects that they create. They're actually earning some income. You're supporting a craftsperson in whatever craft it is that they do. And you get the thing, and usually at a better deal or discount or more stuff, or it's exclusive. There's usually a benefit to doing it through Kickstarter versus doing it like buying the book later through Amazon or whatever. And so you get more stuff. You're supporting the creator. The creator knows there's a backing for it. They can create the project. They get the funding they need to actually print the books or whatever. And so it all kind of comes together into this really lovely, supportive ecosystem of creators and supporters.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Yeah, sounds like it's a win-win for everybody then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Both the creator who gets that joy of knowing they can bring something to the world, and then also the supporter who gets something unique and quite special as being part of it on the ground.
Yeah.
And I love the kind of way of thinking about them as being these mini venture capitalists. I think that's a lovely way of it. And it is it kind of, not only do you get to have that creative side, but you get to have that little businessy side as well as the investor. You're doing something good for the world as well as getting a little kickback too. So Greta, tell us about the project. So you mentioned, well, Megan mentioned the paperback. So do you want to tell us about that?
Sure. So the paperback it's going to be, as Megan said, an omnibus. So it's bringing together 3 quick guides. And so the title of our project is called Foundations of Great Storytelling, Preparing to Write. So these 3 quick guides are things that people need to think about and address before they actually even plot their novel. So it's a foundation for writers. And so we're combining our quick guide on productive writing habits, understanding your genre, and planning a novel, all 3 of those together. And so it's, to me, what happens to a lot of newer writers is they may like dive in and write their first book really enthusiastically, or they get partway into it and then they get totally stopped. They just screech to a halt. Or they start and all of a sudden they want to write, but they cannot find the time in their day, or they can't discipline themselves, or their families keep interrupting them, or fill in the blanks, right? So what we've tried to do is address a lot of those, because, the podcast and a lot of the things we've done, we hear from newer writers, and we hear from them, what is it that's stopping them? And so most of these, the things that are in these quick guides and the things in these courses are responses to the problems that we've heard and problems that we've had and experienced too. So one of them, like I said, productive writing habits. And we've already produced the course that goes with that. That's the only course we've actually pre-produced. And it's called Finish Your Novel Faster, How to Gamify Your Writing Life. And it's a lot of tips and tricks and things that we've used, ways we adjust our calendars, down to even apps and things like that can help. And then the second one is understanding your genre, because that was one that I really experienced when I was pitching. I remember having an editor say to me, well, this kind of reads literary, but there's aspects to it that seem like a romance, but then it's also kind of like a thriller. I think you need to figure out what the heck you're writing. And that is really accurate, So, and a lot of new writers, they know what they love to read, but they don't always know how to replicate that and what are reader expectations and that kind of thing. So we address that. And then planning a novel, we talk about world building, we talk about feeding your creativity, brainstorming tools, even story Bibles, so setting yourself up for success is really what this with this package is about.
Oh, it sounds amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about it because I feel like there are things in there that people do tackle in a small one aspect of it, but this is kind of an overview of like, you want to be a writer, you want to write lots of books. Here's an overview of the way to set yourself up for success and enabling you to do that.
Mm-hmm. It sounds as well, not just setting yourself up for success, but setting yourself up for longevity as well. So you'll be able to put in good practices that are going to sustain you throughout a multi-book career, we hope. Yeah. I love.
And that's actually so we're doing the omnibus of the existing 3 quick guides. But as a Kickstarter exclusive and something that we've just developed this year, we're adding in a section on author strategy, which is all about that longevity and sustainability and figuring out what it is that makes you as a writer tick, what drives you, what motivates you, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then putting that together into a mission statement, tagline, and then strategy with associated tactics. And there's a difference between the two. Not to do my pointy finger thingy, but but there is a difference between strategy and tactics. And so we go into that. And so it is, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help newer or transitioning or stuck writers overcome whatever roadblock it is, so they can pick and choose, take that next step forward and build a career that will satisfy their soul and keep them moving forward for the rest of their lives. If they want to.
Oh, some really good things in that. I love that, satisfying your soul. That's such an important part of it, and getting back to the joy and the love of doing the writing, which I think sometimes we can forget in this desperation to get a book finished and get it published and searching kind of a bestseller, but remembering why we love this, and it is to feed the soul. I think absolutely is so important. So it's interesting that I'm really glad that you've mentioned genre, and I think tropes as well has sort of come up in some of your work as well. And that I hosted a summit at the beginning of the year, and it was really interesting. Every year I host it, there's a new theme that comes out. I noticed that there's a theme for the summit, and this year it was about genre, knowing your genre, understanding, just as you were saying, Greta, what is it that you are writing, and sort of getting clear on that so that your reader is clear on what the story is about as well, and studying genre and understanding the kind of ins and outs and tropes and expectations of that. So I'm really glad to see that that's in there. I know that that is going to be really helpful to a lot of, and not just new writers, not just debut writers, but a lot of people who are finding it difficult to find traction. This could be something that is getting in their way. And then the idea of strategy too. I wish I'd thought of these things when I was kind of starting out, but I didn't. It is because we do want it to be for the long haul, don't we? We do want to know that this is something that we can do post-retirement, that something we can do until we reach a ripe old age. So what a wonderful bonus to offer your Kickstarter fans and supporters. I think it was you, Greta, mentioned a course as well that you've got going on. So is it just the one course, or you have a few courses?
So as part of the Kickstarter, because it depends on funding levels, how things go. So as part of the Kickstarter, some of our stretch goals are to create courses for each of the sections of the Foundation's book. So, like, as I said, we do have the one course, which is Finish Your Novel Faster, How to Gamify Your Writing Life. But we would like to also create one based around the genre book. And the title for that would be Trope Stacking and Other Genre Magic. And then we'd like to create one around the planning a novel book, and that would be called Layering Your Story World. So, and those would be involved in the different tiers. And by the way, when Megan was describing Kickstarter, which you did beautifully, Megan, I might add, you can back ours anyway, for as little as $1, all the way up to the big VIP thing, which I don't even remember how much it is, but it's hundreds of dollars, where you get everything and then some, small group workshops and everything like that. But if people are just curious to see how does Kickstarter work, and you know what I mean, like there's very low funding levels too. So because as a writer, like one of the things I did when we were even thinking about doing this is I went in and found some projects to back just to see. Well, for one thing, I want to support other writers and creators, but also just to see how this whole thing works, and it was very interesting. And we've seen some people that we know and that we've had on the podcast have done really, really well with fiction projects and nonfiction projects. And there's a lot of wonderful stuff on Kickstarter and a lot of good things happening for the creative community. It's really exciting.
I've just been having a little look on your Kickstarter page. There's some lovely offers there, some really varied ways of supporting both of you and in the project. And yeah, as you say, for as low as $1, and then right up to the big bucks, but you get a big bang for that buck as well. So it's really worthwhile. What what are maybe one or two of your favorite offerings for potential supporters? What's been one or two of your kind of most favorite things to put out there? Megan, let's go with you.
Well, to be honest, I'm really excited about the author strategy section. That's kind of sort of my brainchild a little bit. I started developing it over the Christmas break, and then Greta and I did it together and refined it and brought it more to life. So as part of the main Kickstarter, like the base level Kickstarter, we're creating the written section as part of the paperback. But one of our stretch goals is actually to do the full course for it as well. So right now that's going to be an add-on or a stretch goal. And of course, as we're recording this, we don't know how the Kickstarter is going to go and where we're going to fund that or what it's going to look like. So I can't speak to where we're at the moment when this airs. But I think I even can't remember at the top of my head right now what our stretch goal funding was for that. But I am so excited to try to bring that to life, because I think it is something that really hasn't been addressed as much in the author community. And this idea of like really assessing yourself as a person, your personality, your motivations, your drivers, your strengths and weaknesses. It's something that we've talked about in pieces over the years in some of our other live courses and things like that. But this is the first time we're really bringing it all together. So I'm really excited for that piece of it. I think that's going to be, I know it was hugely impactful for me going through the process myself over the holidays and into the beginning of this year. So I think it'll be very helpful for other writers as well.
Oh, undoubtedly. I've got no doubt about that, especially the sort of personality aspect of it and getting to know, for each of your contributors to get to know how they work. And I think it was you, Greta, was saying earlier, you know, there is no one size fits all. Each of us come to it not only with our own personalities, but our own lifestyles and the other kind of demands on our time. And knowing how we work best allows us to magnify the positive aspects of our life, and when we can step into our writing selves, and then when we have to kind of step back and do the other things, family and jobs and all that kind of thing. But I absolutely agree. I think that's going to be hugely beneficial for so many to realize that if they're doing it their way, that doesn't mean they're doing it the wrong way. Just because Stephen King says you've got to write for 2 hours every day if you want to be a real writer, it doesn't mean it's true for everybody. So I applaud you guys for bringing that to the table. I think that's super. Greta, what about you? What's been one of your most favorite?
I'm excited about our big stretch goal to do an audiobook, because I'm an audiobook fan. I listen more than I read these days, just because when you write a lot and you spend a lot of time staring at a screen, you know, it's just really nice to get up and move around and have somebody feed you. And so I'm very excited about that. Our podcast producer could produce for us, and I think because it's nonfiction, it would be a nice thing for us to actually narrate ourselves. We don't have to do adorable accents like yours or any, you know, anything like that. We just can be ourselves. And so I'm excited about doing an audio version. If it, hopefully that will fund enough to get there. And another quick thing I want to say about Megan's excitement over the strategy section, you know, one of the things we've been working on with that is, you know, the author tagline, a mission statement and tagline. And in order to do that, you need to really kind of analyze the genres that you're attracted to and themes that you are attracted to in your reading, as well as what are in your writing. And so I think it comes really well at the end of the book, after we discuss genre, because I do think that that is something that people, I have run into in workshops and in conferences and stuff, that there's can be a little bit of an attitude that, oh, genre writers are just formulaic. And it's the literary writers who are the real writers, you know, and they don't, but it doesn't matter if you're literary or whatever you are. If you write steamy romance, you are still writing genre. I mean, genre and tropes are in everything. And if they weren't there, you wouldn't want to read it. It would just be chaos to your mind, to the Western mind. it would not absorb this story if it didn't have a certain structure to it. And so people who want to throw that out the window and feel that they're going to be the most creative if they just whatever all over the page, I think that they're doing themselves a disservice. Plus, they're making their lives 15 times harder. Everybody you talk to, I should say everybody, but I would say 90% of or more of the people I've talked to will tell you their first book took them forever to write. And their subsequent books, the more that they write, the quicker they get. Well, why? Because they've absorbed story structure. My first book took, I don't know, at least a year and a half, maybe longer. Not Wine and Chocolate Workout, my first fiction book. But now I can usually get a fiction book done in 3 months-ish. And that's first and second drafts, So you do get faster. And the reason you get faster is because you begin to understand the genres that you're attracted to, the tropes that belong in the books you're writing, and story structure and those kind of things. So we can save people time.
Yeah, so such a good valid point there. I think it's like when people talk about stereotypes and cliches. Well, there's a reason that there's stereotypes and there's cliches. It's because they're true. There's an element of truth in all of them, and there's a familiarity, there's an archetype around them that we all recognize and have a familiarity with. And I think that is exactly the same for our genre tropes. They're familiar to us. We feel safe with them. We understand them. We don't need to have it all explained to us. We can just settle into the story and enjoy reading it. It's a really valid point there. I'm conscious of time, but I'm also sort of conscious. I want to make sure I've covered everything that we need to cover. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that I really should ask you about? Good. Well, let me kind of just ask then, for anyone who's listening and has maybe been having, and we'll get to the links at the end, I promise, but just if anyone's listening and they've been thinking, oh, this Kickstarter sounds like a fun idea, I think I want to give that a go. Has it to date been an experience you've enjoyed? What has been one of the really fun things about it? And then just to balance that out, what have you been surprised has been challenging about it as well? And Greta, let's start with you this time.
Well, I am really glad I'm doing it with Megan and not by myself. So that's something I'm enjoying, because Megan is really good at spreadsheets and I'm not. And I, because I think of the magazine background, I just dove right in and wrote descriptions, marketing copy, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think having the two of us with different skill sets has been really helpful. So I love the idea of doing a combo project with somebody, if that can work out for you your first time through, and I've really enjoyed that. It is definitely more work than I thought it was going to be, but everything worth doing is work, right? It's not just like, sometimes we hear these things like, well, Brandon Sanderson got on there and made like $41 million. Well, he's Brandon
got
Sanderson.
a team, let's be honest.
We're not Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, so it's definitely going to be work, and there's a lot of little moving pieces and parts to it. Russell Nolte and Monica Leonel have a great book, and they also have a course, and I forget the book title. Do you remember, Megan?
It's not back there. Where is it? Oh, here it is on my desk. So their book is Get Your Book Selling on Kickstarter, Russell Nolte and Monica Leonel. And they have a Kickstarter accelerator program, which we actually joined as well, and some other things. I was going to say too, like, not to totally interrupt, but having a guide your first time through, I think is very good, very helpful, because, well, I do always go into these things kicking and screaming anyway. I mean, Russell, I actually know Russell on a personal level. He's been telling me to do a Kickstarter for like 2 years. Just now finally getting to it. But But that being said, there's a lot to it. And so having someone kind of help you walk through the steps, understand what needs to happen when, and giving yourself a long lead time to actually accomplish that is kind of critical as well.
It's making me think of that's what it's like to write a novel. It's the same thing. If you've never done it before, there's a lot of moving parts that you need to figure out how to put together. And if you have a guide like me, like a book coach, that can really make your life a lot easier. And so finding guides to help you with the Kickstarter as well. Yeah, I can totally believe that. Yay. It's very exciting. I really applaud you, and I'm wishing you well. And if anybody would like to support you, what is the best way for them to find out how to learn more about the Kickstarter?
Okay, so the Kickstarter itself, I want to double check myself here, but I'm pretty sure it's kickstarter.com/preparing to write. Yes, kickstarter.com/projects/author wheel/preparing to write. But I think it'll just go kickstarter.com/preparing to write. So that's actually the Kickstarter title. So you can go on Kickstarter. And if you have the link, which we'll put in the show notes, or we'll make sure we send your way, that'll be the most direct way. If you're not already a Kickstarter backer, if you've never been on the platform before, you will have to create an account, and you give over your credit card information. It's just like Amazon or whatever. It's an online shopping platform in that sense. So you will have to create an account. You will have to put in your credit card information. You don't get charged until the project actually funds, though, just so you know. But if you go on Kickstarter and you don't have the direct link, you can search for us as the author wheel. That's our creator name on Kickstarter. Or our project is Foundations of Great Storytelling, Preparing to Write. So that's the best way to find us.
And just to look at the page, you don't have to put in your credit card information or anything. You just have to do that to back, right?
Correct.
Because
yes.
I rolled around Kickstarter before I ever supported anything.
Yeah, that's true. You can look at it once the project is live, which as we're recording this, it is not yet live, but it will be by the time this airs. So you should be able to just search for it and find it. And then if you do choose to back it, that's when you actually have to create the account and put in your credit card information. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure that I have that link in there to make it nice and easy for people to go and find you and learn more. It's very exciting. I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come in and share what you've been learning, share what you're sharing with your Kickstarter project. And I wish you all the luck with it.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yes. Thank you, Emma. This is wonderful.